Tom, welcome to the podcast. I first heard of you. Well, the first time I heard you talk was obviously at Expo in Bolton, which we both attended, and I absolutely loved your insights into training. I thought you were fantastic. So honoured to have you here today and to pick your brain on all things training. I suppose I wanted to just start by kind of asking you a little bit about the idea of Tom Project Performance, what it's all about, where the idea came from, and essentially why you're so passionate about it.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. This first podcast I've done in quite a long time, so yeah, very excited to be here and like I say, just share some insights and I guess my take on training and my kind of passion for it. So I think the I'll start with project performance and then maybe just give you a little bit of context in terms of sort of my background and sort of like everything that I've kind of been through that's got me to that point.
Yeah.
So. the the idea behind it was like your body is a project, and I wanted people to see this as like training as a long-term thing. Obviously, like the like 6-week programs and stuff like that are rife, and there's a time and a place for them. But if you really want to get the most out of your training, it's about finding a way to make it consistent and enjoyable for the long term. And that's part of the reason that I kind of take the approach to training that I do is I'm basically trying to kind of promote that long-term enjoyment of training, whilst also getting great results in certain areas. And it's not just a case of like throw it like we're just going to change stuff for the sake of changing it. Like exposing yourself to lots of different modalities. Um, and yeah, basically just like making it as enjoyable as possible. And then the performance element was from my perspective, I came from a background from sports. So there's obviously like sports performance and sort of performance in the gym and that element, but also just bringing in sort of I guess the overarching performance of like now I'm a dad, a business owner, and everything else. Like I want to be performing as best as possible day to day. I want my energy to be as good as possible day to day. So it's like the very acute benefits you'll get from training in terms of that day to day performance, the kind of middle to long term, middle sort of medium term like progressions that you'll make, get stronger, get fitter, that sort of thing, and then also like that longevity, that long term performance of just being able to do the stuff that you like to do now for as long as possible. And a lot of the clients that I work with, they're sort of mid 30s and onwards and just starting to see sort of things drop off a little bit and it's that like for some people it's having a bit of a wake up call of I don't know, a health scare or an injury or something like that that's just like makes them think actually if I don't do something about this and get my training consistent now, it's an uphill battle. And actually like I think it's really cool seeing like most of my clients are in that sort of 35 to 55 age group category, but there's quite a few guys that I coach who are sort of into their 60s and doing stuff that they would never see, like never imagine themselves doing at that age. And also then when you compare it to other people of their age and like the decline that they've seen, it's and like they I think they're always kind of hard on themselves of like, oh, I'm not progressing that much and that sort of thing. But then if you see the level they're at compared to where most people who are 60 are at, it's amazing seeing like how training once or twice a week at that age can have such a profound effect on your health and just your like your physical freedom, what you're able to do day to day.
Yeah, I think most people they don't really think about the long term. Like, where am I going to be in 20 years? Am I going to be able to have the independence to be able to get up off a seat or not? And like you said, the difference between seeing someone who does train at 60 and someone who doesn't, and then obviously that gets harder and harder and harder and harder to like even to get people. I'd imagine even to get people into a gym at 60 who might not have trained, like it's difficult. It's scary for people if they haven't done it their whole lives, and especially like for people who even stop for a couple of years, or maybe like they trained in the gym when they were playing sport and then they retired and then they didn't really do anything, and then like it's difficult for them to kind of get up and go again then like 10 years later.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I completely agree. Sort of, I think that there's two issues for those people who have been fit. It's like they always refer back to sort of the stuff that they
Yes.
were doing, and they've still got that kind of identity. So then it's just trying to meet them where they're at when they do come in. But also, like you say, like gyms can be an intimidating place. Like so sometimes where like even if I'm traveling and I go into a gym I've not been to before, I still feel a bit intimidated sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm someone that loves training and spends a lot of time in the gym. So I think there's those two elements of kind of overcoming that sort of hurdle of just accepting where you're at right now. Um, and that's something that obviously when people have injuries and that sort of thing is something that you have to do. And then also like that kind of intimidation factor and just I think well like one of the biggest issues that I see with guys of that sort of age is they know how they used to train when they were in their 20s, maybe like early 30s, when they don't have commitments. It's like it's very much a big part of what they do, and then they're now trying to fit that 5 or 6 day a week training like plan into their current schedule with family, with busier jobs, with more like general life commitments, and it's there's just a disconnect. It's just that it doesn't work.
I'd imagine there's a lot of, with the type of clientele that you have, I imagine there's a lot of kind of managing expectations involved because, yeah, you're right. Like if you trained hard throughout your 20s, and you were able to do so kind of pain free, and you just put your body through the through the windmill, and it was you just kind of were able to get on with it, and you were able to get up and go again. And then they tried to do that again when they're in their 30s or their 40s, when they've a full-time job, a family to look after, then trying to pull themselves out of the bed to do that, it must be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
I wanted to go through a couple of your quotes. I called them Tom's training quotes, which I really really liked. All right, so you also talked about reoccurring niggles. So I just wanted to read out something you said. So you said, contrary to what you might think, stopping training completely often isn't necessary, but adapting what you are doing and how you are doing it is. So, can you go into that a little bit in terms of someone who might be getting reoccurring niggles and might be making the mistake of stopping completely?
Yeah, so this has come from both sort of some personal experience, because I think we've all been there, and, like made those mistakes, but also just it's like seeing a lot of clients kind of go through this. Um, what like say just like you overreach a little bit and something like you tweak something, and you've got a little bit of pain, a little bit like maybe a little bit of weakness, that sort of thing, which is like very normally happens, both like sometimes from training, sometimes from stuff outside of training. What a lot of people tend to do is just stop doing everything they were doing, and then when that niggle has become pain free, which over time it probably will, they just go back to doing exactly the same stuff that they were doing before, and just expecting like a different result essentially. And I think one of the key things that like we need to consider is like pain free is great and should be part of where we're aiming for, but pain free does not necessarily mean we've rebuilt our performance,
Mm.
and we've rebuilt our tolerance, and that's essentially what happens when we get an injury is like the tissue tolerance has probably dropped a little bit, and obviously depending on what the injury is going to depend on like how much that is and the like how much you need to adapt what you're doing. But I think it's really important, like when something like that happens, like yeah, like I'm not saying like you go back in the gym the very next day, but like maybe give it a few days, and then start to get it moving and start loading it again, but at the level that it's at now, not where you were previously. And if you take like I don't know, someone gets a shoulder niggle when they're doing a bench press, for example, um, like most people would obviously just stop doing bench press and then go back to it, and then obviously it would happen again. But if you just reduce the load, reduce the range of motion slightly, and probably just control the tempo, you're probably going to be able to find a range and a load that you can use and do pain free,
Yeah.
and then that's essentially your starting point. And then from there, all we'd look to do is add more range until we're going through like adequate range, start to progress the load, and then start to progress the speed and or complexity of how we're loading. And this is something I went through with with my knee. I've had I've had 5 surgeries over the past couple of years. But
ACL, is it?
all were rugby related.
Yeah.
First off, I had labral tears in both my shoulders, which I had operated on 3 weeks apart. So that was fun going from like my operator's arm then being my good arm 3 weeks later. Then I tore my hamstring tendons and LCL off my left knee, um, which I think overall was the worst surgery. Then I did meniscus in my right knee, and then I did ACL and meniscus in my left knee. So they were all like they were all surgeries, and then I stupidly possibly went skiing a little bit later, like a few years later, and like obviously hindsight's a great thing, and I was like, oh, I'm fit, I train in the gym, whatever, like I'll be all right. But what I hadn't really sort of factored in at that point was just like more sort of reactive, like plyo based stuff, things like that. Like I was strong, but I didn't have enough sort of like variability to
Mm.
like adapt to different positions and be strong in different positions. Um, and also like I'm not a great skier and I'm quite heavy, so uh,
Is this where the kind of the passion for, because I know you incorporate a lot of plyometrics into your own program and probably your client's program as well. Is that where that came from?
yeah, it was a combination of that and also missing feeling athletic. Like I
Mm.
stopped playing rugby for a couple of years. I was training consistently and like I think probably like from the outside person in to look at, I would look athletic. Like I would look athletic. Like I could run. I could like lift in the gym. I could like do like all this bodyweight stuff. Um, but I hadn't really trained anything explosive or anything like reactive based.
Mm.
And I think it's something that I always include a little bit of it now, both for myself and for clients, even if it's not a major goal, because I think there's so many positive benefits to sort of like it like being good at those landings and
Mm.
being able to kind of react to the floor, just that like the variability in terms of landing, getting strong, like loading and controlling into like deep positions,
Mm.
and again, just going back to like a couple of clients that I've had come through, it's like they've got to the point where they're like, oh, I'm overthinking it. If I need to like, I need to jump off like a knee height step or jump over a gate, which is stuff I'd never would have done before. But because you like, even if you are doing like some heavy squats and stuff like that, it won't necessarily build that confidence to be able to land and know that you're not going
Yeah.
to like tweak your knee or that sort of thing. So yeah, it was off the back of it was off the back of that I started doing it, and it was like when I started, I sort of noticed quite a big deficit from my left to my right,
Mm.
even though like it was like years ago now that I did like that I injured the ACL. There was still like a little bit lingering there, and there might still be a little bit now, but it's much closer to what it was, even though like from a strength perspective, everything was like I would say everything was completely even left versus right. It's just that like that last sort of element of just being able to like react on that side that it yeah it's it that that and once I started doing a little bit of it I was like actually I'm really noticing this difference and noticing this deficit, so it kind of it motivated me to want to do more. And then it like when you've been doing it for sort of a couple of months, you then really notice the difference in terms of just like how kind of springy and generally athletic that you feel, or like just the like it being confident to just go into a sprint at any point or that sort of thing, which I think a lot of people like as you get sort of mid 30s and onwards, like unless you do still play a sport, it's probably like it can become like years since you've actually pushed that speed.
Yeah, I would imagine there's probably a misconception from a lot of people that like might have done plyometrics during their years of playing sport because it was incorporated into their training, and then the minute they stopped playing sport, they probably think that, oh well, there's no need to do plyometrics anymore. But as you're saying now, it's like it really is from a like general standpoint of kind of independence and quality of life and you know like everyday little simple things that you wouldn't think of.
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Another one that I wanted to go through, which as well, is most people think athletic performance takes a massive dive as soon as you hit the big 3-0. It's just not the case, but training is likely going to be a lot harder. What are some of the reasons that, you know, training seems to kind of take a nosedive after 30 for a lot of people, and how can they avoid this?
So I think going back to sort of what I said earlier about just all those other kind of commitments coming in. And yeah, you're not going to be able to train as much as what you previously did. Probably recovery is not going to be quite as good. Not necessarily because you're older, but if you like, particularly if you've got young kids, like your sleep's going to get like thrown off a little bit. You're just not going to be able to kind of manage those elements probably quite as well. And that's not to say that you can't manage them as well as possible, but there is going to be those sort of external elements that come in, plus also like the time pressure. But I think the reason that most people do like think that is because they do end up having like quite protracted like periods of time where they don't and like essentially train. And then they come back and they probably get like maybe get injured if they push a bit too hard, a bit too soon.
Yeah.
I think yes, it's a combination of those two things, and I think it is that sort of consistency element, particularly from like with like regards to sort of plyometrics and that sort of thing of like if you've not been it like rapidly loading your tendons in that way, they are going to take a little bit of time to adapt to that. So you just have to be like slow and steady in terms of the progression that you use with that. And that's not to say that you can't maintain it, but I think like most people either have like they are not managing the recovery side of things and adapting the training to suit where they're at that point, or end up having like protracted periods of time where they're not training. Whereas even if they were just doing sort of like the minimum amount just to keep things ticking over, they would maintain those things for a very long time.
Hmm. Do you have any advice for, let's say, people who are in their 30s and, they might have been training hard and then they stopped to kind of maybe hit a little bit of a burnout, and like you said, life started to happen to them. They ended up getting a couple of kids, and maybe they were kind of constantly getting injured. Like, I know from a physical standpoint, we talked about in terms of the amount of load that you take on is obviously going to be really important. But even from like a psychological standpoint, because I'd imagine you will be more experienced than anyone on this, constantly getting these serious injuries that like take you back 10 steps. It's difficult to get up and go again and go and also pull yourself back a little bit and say, oh, right, I can't do a lot, which I'm probably used to doing a lot as someone who is athletic, as someone who has, been in high level competition. It's like you always probably want to do more. You probably have to do a little bit less, and it's probably difficult to, like, a lot of people are probably like, oh, you know what, maybe just this, I'm just going to stop training, this isn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I think there's like multiple things that come into that. Firstly, like you're alluding to, that like if you've been used to being able to train really regularly and really consistently, and then you're not able to do that. Um, I think that like that's really hard because I think like everyone to a certain extent will have a bit of an all or nothing mindset, and if you're not able to do like what you feel like you should do, then that or you try to and you end up failing. It makes training feel a lot harder and a lot less motivating because you feel like you're not really getting the most out of it.
Yeah.
So like in terms of that, something that I've spoken about before is almost having like a weekly minimum checklist of if everything else like if nothing else happens, this is the stuff I want to do on a weekly basis.
Mm.
And so like what if I'm looking at doing that, something that like I think like I maybe want to it depends on like on the focus, and you can have it as like complex or as simple as you like, but maybe like 3 or 4 hard sets of a push, a pull, something quad dominant, something like hip dominant,
Mm.
which you could do in like 1 or 2 sessions in the gym quite easily, and that's like going to be like enough to like at very least maintain your muscle mass and your strength for like a period of time. And then the other one that I quite like, and this is something I noticed when like, 'cause I've got 2 young boys. When my first was born, I stopped running for a period, and then I found it just an uphill battle to kind of get back into it. Like it felt really hard for like quite a while.
Yeah.
Whereas with my second, I just committed to doing like my minimum was like 20 minutes a week. It's like if nothing else, I'll just go out the door, run for 10 minutes, run 10 minutes back, and that's like it's not optimal, but it helped me to just maintain like aerobically where I was at. And then just trying to fit in as much as possible outside of that, like whether it's like as a running with a dog or cycling like for a commute or like those little bits people kind of I think they think they don't matter, but like
Yeah,
when you're
they snub their nose at them, and I can understand why they would as well, especially if you're someone who was like a beast at running or whatever it is.
yeah, I mean I don't think I would ever class myself as that, but yeah, no, I think you just have to have that like slight shift in mindset, and I think having like, okay, this is what I'm setting out to do. This is like my kind of optimal for the week,
Mm.
but this is my level that I don't want to drop below, and having that as your kind of minimum standard for the week, I think particularly if it's like a checklist, because then you can have like ultimate flexibility.
Yeah,
And yeah, most of the time it's really useful for people to have a routine and a schedule that they stick to, but it's not feasible for some people, and like stuff changes on a daily basis for some people. So having just a checklist of stuff that you can fall back to, even if it ends up being you just like front load it or back load it into the week just to kind of tick the box for that week, that's going to put you in a much better position than you just kind of sacking it off completely.
yeah,
So that I think there's that, like getting over that all or nothing mindset is massive. And then from an injury perspective, yeah, I think that's really really hard from a mindset perspective, because particularly if it's like I found the knee injuries like probably worse, just because even day to day you're in pain, walking you're in pain, doing just everything that you do, and it's a much bigger limiter to sort of like I call the term physical freedom, like the stuff that you physically want to do, like even if it's just like go for a walk with a dog or like run around with the kids or that sort of thing. So I think like it having that constant pain and that sort of thing does make it very very hard, and it also like it limits you a lot in terms of what you do in the gym,
yeah,
or from a training perspective. But I think that probably the best thing that you can do in that situation is find something else that you can make your focus while you're not able to load the other stuff as much,
mm.
because like you are gonna obviously, if you've got a knee injury, you are gonna have to manage the load, and there is gonna be some stuff that you can't do for a little while, or you have to scale right back. But having other goals that you can still work hard on, and make your training purposeful, I think is really important, because I think again a lot of people when they do get an injury, it's like they revolve their training purely around the rehab, which it makes it really unenjoyable and really demotivating, because like if that's all you're doing, so having other elements that you can focus on, and even if like it could be as simple as like some upper body hypertrophy, if you've got a lower body injury, and just putting like more emphasis on that. But I like it's part of the reason that I ended up sort of falling into like body weight and calisthenics, was it was after I had one of my knee injuries. I wasn't able to do the stuff that I had been doing from a resistance perspective, and like kind of your big compounds like your squats, your deadlifts, that sort of thing had always been sort of my bread and butter of training, and still are. But I wasn't able to do them at like as much or as what I had been, and training was just getting a bit stale and a bit dull. And I was looking for something else to kind of explore, and and then that's how I found like calisthenics, and just like having that as a focus then made training more enjoyable. And I think as a result of that, it means that you're more likely to be in the gym and training and probably recover from the injury like quicker, because A, you've got a positive mindset, and B, you're there doing other stuff, and it's easy to fit like rehabby based exercises in between, like something else that's maybe a little bit harder or a little bit more engaging or a little bit more kind of purposeful. Again, from a longevity perspective, I think being able to kind of fall back on different elements of training, or even just like seasonally, like obviously in the summer it's much nicer like spending more time outside. So I like either being able to do like a load of bodyweight stuff outside, or like falling back on some like cycling, running, that sort of thing, and having that as a bit more focus, I think makes training a lot more enjoyable. And then obviously in the winter, you're probably not going to want to be outside as much, and you might actually get like obviously for most people like food is a bit more abundant. You're probably eating a little bit more because there's just a lot more food around. So like it's quite nice to then have a focus on like building a bit more strength, a bit more muscle mass in the gym, and that becoming a bit more of a focus. And I think from a training perspective, that's where like keeping in elements of everything. So like I'd always keep like some like plyometric and power stuff in, some strength stuff, some hypertrophy stuff, some endurance stuff. But like depending on what's going on and what's the goal at a given time, you might scale something up and something down to kind of fit where you're at that point or what you're focusing on.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people will listen to that now and they'll be like, oh, right, well, Tom, where am I going to get the time to do my plyometrics and my endurance stuff and my hypertrophy stuff and also practice my sport as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got to fit it into like like your given constraints, but
Yeah,
that's where sort of understanding a little bit more about sort of like what the minimum effective dose for those things
mm,
is. And obviously, it's one of those things. The higher level you are in any given thing, the more you're going to have to put into it to progress it, but also like the more you'll have to put into it to maintain that. But in comparison to what you need to put into actually progress something, the maintenance level is actually quite a bit lower. So that's where like as like a very basic program, you could have like the minimum effective dose for everything,
yeah,
which is what I try and recommend is like that kind of minimum checklist if you can. And there might still be some stuff that you don't do or don't prioritize on a weekly basis. But if that's your kind of base program, um, you can then plug and play with like I want to focus a bit more on like power and Olympic lifting here, so I'm going to like put more time and emphasis into that. Or like yeah, I'm like I just want to focus on building a bit more muscle mass, so like I'm going to keep a little bit of the other stuff in, but we're going to cut like I don't know, maybe have one heavy set per movement per week just to kind of keep that ticking over while we focus on pushing hypertrophy a bit more or that sort of thing.
yeah. I think an important thing you said there as well is about maintenance. I think a lot of people forget that like the goal can and should be maintenance. It's like they'll think, oh, if I'm not going to progress in something, then I'm not going to do it at all. Whereas, maintaining the strength that you have or maintaining the muscle mass that you have should be a priority for people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And it's kind of similar to like sort of fat loss in that respect as well. I think a lot of people like think like maintenance from a fat loss perspective is like it's not it's like they kind of discount it as like as a phase of fat loss, but actually for most people, particularly if you've got like a decent bit of weight that you need to lose, like having a kind of step down approach of like going to focus on dropping a bit and then when energy drops, when like training drops off, that sort of thing, like having a period at maintenance is really, really beneficial for a lot of people and changing like your goal to something a bit more performance based. Now you're kind of fueling a little bit better,
Mm.
with the view of like at some point when those things kind of level out, then focusing on maybe dropping again. But obviously, like for most people are great at fat loss, with like fad diets, crash diets, that sort of thing, and they can work okay. But what most people are terrible at is maintaining that off the back of it. So actually having a block where the goal is maintenance is like beneficial from that perspective as well as a training perspective. And that's where I think like just from the training side of things, like when life is busier, when work is busier, when family life is busier, that like having the goal of maintenance, I think it feels a bit uninspiring sometimes, but actually like it's only going to be for a short period, and actually that's really beneficial because then when you do potentially have a bit more time or want to prioritize it a little bit more, you've not dropped off massively. You've still like you've maintained all that stuff with like a minimal input. So then like it's so much easier to then get back into it rather than having to like start again essentially.
Yeah, you're more likely to see strength gains if you've been maintaining versus if you've decided that actually I'm not going to do the thing that I was currently doing that was giving me progress or maintaining progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one you said was someone has told you that doing certain movements will injure you, bending your spine, for example. Fear of movements is going to keep you feeling fragile and more than likely end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. Can you explain that one for the listeners?
Yeah, so this all comes from the sort of movement optimism philosophy, where we're just looking at like I think people are sometimes told, "Oh, don't bend your spine to pick something up," when in actual fact, like it's not going to be the movement as such that's going to cause an issue. It's going to be like external factors that may potentially be injurious, whether that's like the load that you're lifting, the speed that you're lifting at. Plus also like we know that like pain science and injury is like much more complex than that, and there can be a multitude of different factors that do come into injury. So by telling someone don't do that, you'll get injured, means that they're less likely to do that thing. Therefore, their tolerance to that thing will most likely drop. So then, if they do end up having to do that thing, they're more likely to get injured when they do that. And that's where sort of like the whole kind of bending your spine stuff comes from. It's like if you look at what people do day to day, it's like people bend down to pick their children up, or like bend down to pick up a washing basket, or like that. They're doing those things on like a daily basis. And obviously they're absolutely fine, but like so building some level of tolerance by doing some training around like in those ranges to me just make it just makes sense because if you're saying like this movement is inherently bad, you're basically saying that like there's going to be no training adaptation from loading something, which means that you kind of don't believe in resistance training as it is, because essentially that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for to get a stimulus to load something, to get some adaptation, to get a little bit stronger through that range of motion. So yeah, I think it's I think it's important that we don't completely discount technique when it comes to lifting, and
Yeah.
obviously for most people, probably keeping a quote unquote like relatively neutral spine is going to be the strongest position for them for a deadlift and an RDL,
Yeah.
for example. Um, but it's that's also saying like not to say that like lifting with a rounded spine is inherently bad, but we probably just need to like be mindful of like the other factors and like the load that we're using and that sort of thing. But those things can be trained, and there's loads and loads of guys out there like um, Mark Rosenberg and Atlas Power Shrugged and all those guys doing like huge numbers on like Zercher deadlifts and Zercher Jefferson curls and that sort of thing. So yeah, like I think thinking that those things will hurt you will probably be the most likely thing to end up hurting you.
Yeah, because you'll never build up strength. I remember a physio actually told me a couple of years ago when I was younger, not to do deadlifts because deadlifts will hurt your back. And like thinking about that now, like that's absolutely insane advice from a physiotherapist. Do you think that like that's this scaremongering of certain exercises because people don't understand maybe load management and they're solely focusing on form and technique? Do you think that's something that is contributed by maybe like personal trainers when they first come out of their personal training course? Like I don't remember ever being taught about load management when I did my personal training course. I do remember being like taught about technique to a small degree, but it was very much
Yeah.
about form and technique and having to have that kind of stiff flat back versus anyone having any sort of a conversation on load management.
Yeah, absolutely. I think load management is something that um, is spoken about a lot more now. I don't know if like I've not seen what's sort of included in like PT qualifications like these
Yeah,
days.
because saying that now, that's going back a while for me now. But
Yeah, yeah. No, I've got no idea. Hopefully, there is an element of that, and I think that I don't know if it's just the like the bubble that I'm in and the stuff that I see on social media. I see a lot more of, like people talking about load management and kind of moving away from like this technique is bad.
that could be your echo chamber, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I don't know if that's like it is more prevalent or it's just what I'm seeing. But I don't think they're like but like particularly when I did my PT qualification, I don't I probably only heard the term load management like 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully it's kind of bleeding through and like people are becoming a lot more aware of it. And I think it's hard, particularly when you're starting, because it's like it just adds more kind of complexity to things. So I think it's important to um, yeah, to sort of like to make people aware of it, but also not like paralyze them with too much information.
Mm.
And I think that in terms of that, a lot of it is a massive part of this for coaches is thinking about the way that you communicate it to like communicate technique to clients,
Mm.
and making sure that you're not scaremongering them by saying, "Oh, don't lift that way, because you'll get injured. Maybe we can lift this way because it'll be a more efficient lift, or it's going to hit this muscle a little bit more effectively, or that sort of thing." Because it's like I said, there's so many factors alongside load management that will determine whether someone gets injured from doing something. And in reality, like, yeah, if someone like dumps 200 kilos worth of like load into their lower back when they're not ready for it, yeah, they might get injured. But I think it's if you're being sensible in terms of kind of progression and that sort of thing in the gym, I think it's like it's lifting is a very, very safe thing to do.
Yeah. What are some other ways that people can kind of prevent getting injured in the gym? That's not just about load management. Like, what are some sensible advice you could give to people?
Um, I guess it depends a little bit on on what they're doing. I think the biggest things are like obviously like we've spoken about sort of load management, but like not just looking at the load on the bar, looking at the speed in which we're going into ranges.
Yeah.
Because obviously like that's like force is mass times acceleration, as my physics teacher told me. So it's not just that mass on the bar, it's like how quickly we're accelerating. And if say for example like an RDL, if you've got a doable weight that you're like just flying down into that bottom position, you're going to get a big spiking force in the bottom position, for
Mm,
example. So I think like particularly when people are starting, making sure we're thinking about like controlling our lifts,
yeah.
and then just building tolerance to doing things quickly. And that's where I think like deep deep range pliers can be like really useful because you can basically do sort of you can use them to build a decent amount of volume
Mm,
without like massive kind of like impulses in force in those deep ranges.
yeah.
So they can be a really nice way to kind of bridge that gap between um, let's say with Olympic lifting, you're having to drop into like say doing a clean, you're having to drop into that deep, very deep position with a lot of load. Doing a bit more kind of prep work to make sure you're good, like controlling into those positions quite quickly and building volume in those positions is gonna be helpful because that was one thing after my knee injuries that um, I kind of reflected on this when I started doing a bit more of the plyo stuff was like I didn't feel comfortable doing or like pushing my cleans even though I had the strength to be able to lift more, but it was the thought of dropping quickly
Yeah.
into like those bottom positions with a lot of load on me that I was never comfortable with. So like finding more ways to kind of bridge the gap rather than just be like, oh no, that's I can't do that thing. I think it is quite useful. And then the other thing is just like range of motion. I think the control element comes into that because um, and being specific with technique when you are trying to load a certain muscle is important because at the end of the day, if your goal is hypertrophy, you want to keep the tension on the muscle you're trying to load.
Hmm.
So if you drop into like bottom of the bench press and you end up taking the tension off the pecs because like you've rolled your shoulders forwards, um, like you're essentially not loading the pecs in the most stretched position, which is obviously going to be like really beneficial from a hypertrophy perspective. So I think just having periods where you go back to like potentially using tempo a little bit more, like focusing on control, make sure you're feeling good with that. And it's something like I just generally feel quite good a lot of the time if I have like some fast stuff, some heavy stuff, and then like most of my hypertrophy stuff is that I'm focusing on like pauses in those deep ranges or like slow eccentrics and that sort of thing because it helps me to like keep tension on the tissue I'm trying to work. Um, and by slowing it down, it normally means I'm able to get deeper into those positions than what I would have done had I gone a little bit quicker. And I think really that's the main benefit of using tempo when it comes to training. Not necessarily it's like quote unquote better for hypertrophy, but I think it allows you to keep the tension on the muscle you're trying to work and probably go through bigger ranges whilst doing that.
Yeah, so there's a really a kind of a psychological standpoint to that because it builds you confidence in them bottom positions that you might, let's say you are rehabbing an injury or something like that. It's like, oh, you know, you can get into that deep position pain free, and that builds confidence then to be able to go back to doing them things that you probably are a little bit terrified to do because you got an injury doing a certain movement or dropping in a certain way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's like a really sort of valid point from it, like that kind of psychological perspective. And the like I don't know if it was David Gray that said this initially, but I think I heard it from him was like essentially what you're trying to do with like with training generally, whether it's rehab or whether it's like pushing your performance and getting a new PB or that sort of thing, it's like you're basically trying to just build a bank of evidence to tell you that you're able like to, so that you're confident to do that lift. Like if it's from a rehab perspective, it's like you're building a bank of evidence to know that if you go back to playing sport or if you go back to like lifting what you were lifting before, that you've done the work before that to feel confident doing it. And then, like I said, it's the same when you're looking at like training from a performance perspective and trying to like hit a new PB or that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's very good. And I remember I was talking to a good physio before, and he was saying he was saying about even when you're talking about tempo, he was like, if you're rehabbing an injury or anything like that, like your muscles or anything else, they don't like aggression and they don't like speed. So you know, slowing down and getting into that deep range of motion pain free is obviously going to be really really important. Talk to me a little bit more about bodyweight training. Like why should I start doing a little bit of bodyweight training? Because I'm thinking here in my head now, it says like you know what, I should really add some more plyos into my training because
Yeah.
I retired from football there last year. I didn't get injured or anything like that. It just started to become too much of a commitment in terms of I was getting older and like, you know, traveling to different places, you know, on a Friday night when I'm trying to get home and then get to work and stuff like that. And I was like, and I kind of just kind of fell out of love. And now I play sport now and again. Like I'm bang average at every sport. I could play a little bit of everything really poorly, you know. So I'll enjoy doing a little bit of Muay Thai. I'll play a bit of tennis. I did a little bit of rugby when I was younger, a little bit of basketball when I was younger. The shortest basketballer you'll meet in Ireland. Football was obviously the sport, and obviously doing things like high rocks and stuff like that now, and anything to kind of be a little bit competitive without having to actually, you know, get injured or get hit on a pitch or something like that. But
Yeah.
like, do you think that for people like me who have, you know, are in their early 30s who have kind of retired from sport, like, is there an argument to do a bit of bodyweight training, and is there an argument to incorporate some plyos?
Absolutely, yes. I think from a player perspective, like you say, you've just kind of stopped playing sport. I think doing a little bit of that just to kind of keep your tendons healthy, keep that sort of that spring and that sort of like athleticism, I think is like really really beneficial. And it's going to be one of those like obviously as you get older, like tendons do degrade, and like they're probably going to be one of the quickest things that do degrade as you get older. So yeah, keeping some of that in definitely. And then from a bodyweight perspective, um, personally, yeah, I think so. I think it's a new skill, and like I've mentioned before, like the physical freedom. It's I think just being able to kind of control your body weight through space is a very different. You'll get a very different stimulus to what you'll get from like just like doing sort of just like normal resistance training, and that from the perspective of I think you are more likely to kind of load through range of motion that you probably don't normally hit. So again, like if you're not moving into those ranges often, it's like you're going to kind of lose the ability to. So like strength through sort of some deeper ranges, building strength in areas that you also like are probably neglected from sort of normal strength training in terms of like being like strong protracts in the shoulder and your like compression strength through the abs and that sort of thing, which obviously it's like it's an end range strength and you don't train that very often with like normal strength training. So incorporating a little bit of bodyweight skill stuff can kind of tick a couple of those boxes without um whilst making it kind of fun and not feeling like I need to hit like this range or this motion with like um with your kind of your normal training if you like. And then I like I said, I enjoy it just from a perspective of um I think it's big just because it is so different. It's and that there's it's so varied in terms of the amount of different thing like ways you can go. Like handstands for one thing, like are a whole different kettle of fish to so, like using gymnastic rings and learning some different skills on there. And it's one of those things I think it's very progressive in terms of like if you can understand a few of the basic movements, it then like you open up a whole new range of different skills and elements that you can kind of go like look at doing. So like if you can do a 10-second handstand, for example, you can then potentially look at doing a handstand press or a shoulder press or like start on like doing like that or handstand press ups or um that's like that sort of thing. And I think it's just like loading the wrist in that way, for example, is something again that you don't do
Mm.
very often. So it's yeah, I think there's a lot of like minor benefits alongside probably the overall enjoyment that you would get from doing it.
Yeah, and I think as well, like it's a really good point that like having an open mind to all different types of training and modalities and stuff like that. Because if you're training a long time, like things got. I know there's some people that will like, all right, I'm gonna do hypertrophy training for the rest of my life, and like they're happy to
Yeah.
do that. That's fair, but like. For me personally, I think, having an open mind to be able to try new things all the time, it does create that kind of enjoyment that it's like you're starting training again for the first time, and that excitement of learning new skills. I think that can't be underestimated for your training journey over time as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's really important. And like when you kind of go into it, having that kind of beginner's mind of like knowing that you're not going to be good, and that is something that does like hold people back sometimes. Like it might be like really strong jet like generally, but then you put like try and get them to like learn this new skill or something like that, and it's like it's one of the like funniest things. Like it's like everyone's stupid when they're upside down because like you get someone, like upside down in the handstand or like on the rings or something like that and you're like point your toes towards the ceiling and they're like thinking like like they can't appreciate being upside down, so it's like actually learning to control your body in it when you're inverted. I find gives people a better appreciation of movement when they're the right way up as well.
Yeah, and it's also a great point. It's like someone you might be intimidated from, like maybe they're very sophisticated, they're very capable in some areas. So just get them to do some upside downs on the rings. You won't be intimidated by them anymore as they make a mockery of themselves. Can you give a little bit of advice in terms of, okay, for let's say people who are starting training for the first time, talk a little bit about warm-ups and warm-ups when you're training. In your experience, what are the mistakes that people make? Because I know you've spoken about this as well.
Um, Yeah, so I think I've been on sort of a bit of a journey with this. I think when I first started coaching, um, I was going through sort of like the process of like everyone had to do like 20 minutes of joint prep before they get into like their before they started lifting essentially.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that as I went on, I was like actually it feels quite nice, but actually like there's not that much benefit to doing like that much of it, just because like it's generally like low stimulus, so you're not getting enough stimulus to actually like make a long term change. And yeah, you might find that you feel a little bit better when you go into a squat, but I think there's much better ways that you can get prepped for your main lifts. And if you are really short on time, like you can just do like lighter sets of your main lift to kind of get into it. And I think it's one of those. It's obviously it depends on the amount of time that you've got. If you've got loads and loads of time to train, like yeah, like get a bit more complex with it. Focus on like open up ranges a little bit more and that sort of thing. Because like I say, it does feel quite nice, and you might get like some marginal benefit to hitting certain ranges or positions with like a little bit more frequently. But I think if not, you can probably spend like a couple of minutes on a piece of like CV kit and then go into like your first like an empty barbell for your first warm-up set and then just build from there. Um, and I think it's yeah I think for some people it can just become a barrier to training if you feel like you've got to do 15 or 20 minutes of prep to actually go and lift. I think that's very counterproductive. And like so it's probably that like there's gonna be a sweet spot, like maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes to actually make sure you're prepped. But for the most part, we want to get to our stimulating lift as quickly as possible. And I personally think like um, adding in some like deep plyos and things like that can be a really, really good way to like warm up into your session, but also get like a good stimulus from doing that stuff as well. And or just like stuff that just improves your movement variability in general. So just moving through slightly different ranges, spending 5 minutes doing that, or but then if you are very short on time, like just going straight into your warm-up sets, because I think it's like you see all those things of like I did like all this foam roll and I did this and then my range improved by this much. It's like, but they're not comparing to like if you just grabbed a barbell and done like a couple of sets of empty barbell like RDLs to warm up your hamstrings. Like you'd see like probably the better like the same if not better improvement from just doing that. Um, and you'll actually get like going to be ready to see your work sets a lot quicker than spending 10 or 15 minutes like rolling around on the floor and doing like a load of like foam rolling and sort of mobilization and joint prep stuff.
Yeah, I think that it looks good on like Instagram and stuff like that, and you'll see like athletes doing it. And but I think people don't understand that. All right, an athlete, and they say, oh yeah, this person's like spends 3 hours in the gym, but that person gets paid. Like they get paid, and they're not doing 3 hours of heavy sets.
Yeah.
They have the time to do like an hour of pre and post warm ups and cool downs, and do you know what I mean? It's completely different to someone who's time poor, who has kids at home or has a job or whatever it is. And that actually goes on to something that you said as well. So, one last quote from you. All right. When I first became a dad in 2021, I very quickly realized my old approach to training wasn't going to work. Training 5 to 6 days a week was never going to happen. So, can you give some advice to like dads and business owners who are time poor and but still want to continue to make progress with their training, and maybe talk a little bit about your own experience and your own findings from that?
So yeah, in terms of this, like we've touched on a few of these bits before, but I think being realistic with what's doable is obviously gonna be massive. And that's not to say that you have to be like, like I'm not gonna be able to like still maintain and like get good results, but just being realistic with like the time that you're actually able to put into it. And I still do a bit of in-person PT now, so I'm in the gym like 1.5 days a week. So I train in the gym twice a week, and then I do one session a week at home. I've got like a chin up bar and a dip bar. Um, and that's basically what my training's looked like for the past 3, 4 years now. Of like every so often I get an extra session in the gym, but it's very rare. Like I've only trained in the gym that much, and yeah, it's like it's still three like solid sessions because I'm able to load like my upper body like really well at home. But I think yeah, being realistic with what's doable and then just looking at ways to make the most of your like of what you've got, whether that's like if it is training at home, even if it's like short sessions and pushing those like just doing a few hard sets that you push close to failure or that sort of thing. Um, and that like I said before, the kind of that for when it is particularly hectic, that minimum effective dose training and like the minimum like your minimum standards for the week. And then the other thing on this that kind of springs to mind is like when I've been through periods of like really bad sleep with my when my boys were like well Ollie's really bad right now, but like when they've been really bad, performance does drop off in the gym, but I think it's generally and like recovery is definitely harder,
Mm.
but the biggest thing that drops off is your desire to train
Mm.
more so than those other things. So I think finding a way that you can like you can enjoy your training and you can make it consistent, and that doesn't mean like you're gonna love it all the time, and there are going to be times where you do have to kind of drag yourself to to get a session in. But when that's the case, just like start with something you really enjoy, and then like the discipline side of things, like so similar to what you would do like elsewhere, is like put your sessions in the diary, make sure it's like where like when you're going to do it, and it's kind of scheduled in because then it's like yeah it's scheduled in, so it's like it's not you're not kind of leaving it to chance, but you're also just trying to make it as enjoyable as possible when when you're not feeling it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, well then I'm going to leave you with three questions, and then I'll let you go. So first one is, if you were to talk to younger Tom, right? What are three pieces of training wisdom that you would give him for the next 10 years?
Um, that's a good question. I think the first one would probably be start doing plyo sooner.
Yeah, go with the theme of the podcast. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, there'd definitely be that. I think probably the other one that we've not really spoken about, but like back when like in my 20s, like everything had to be really hard all the time, and actually
Mm,
like obviously when you're short on time, like intensity from a lifting perspective is really important. But like yeah, respect when you need to push intensity, and then respect when actually doing easier stuff is going to be beneficial, particularly from a CV perspective.
yeah,
Accumulating like easy like CV volume is going to be really really helpful, and get a really good stimulus. So that like don't you don't need to make everything super hard.
yeah,
Um, because I think that like yeah, I definitely kind of put myself in a bit of a hole, and like it hard CV was like is always the thing that when I am like not recovering well or like sleeps bad or that sort of thing, that's always the thing that makes me ill. Like my immune system always takes a massive
mm,
hit from doing hard CV. So like if you're on like on the edge of like feeling a bit like you know what it's like when you don't feel great,
yeah,
or like you're feeling a little bit run down, like just don't do hard CV stuff
yeah.
then.
Do,
Uh,
do you think that's a mistake that 20-year-olds make all the time? It's like they just beat their bodies up. They just think every session needs to be that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like probably the overall like last point that I would say is just like make your training purposeful.
Mm,
Because I think there's always that temptation to just like say push it hard all the time, and actually like when you like having been through phases of like training a lot less and seeing the results that I've got from doing less, and actually like how good I've been feeling, like made me kind of reflect on that and be like, actually, yeah, if I'd been a bit more purposeful here and actually been a bit smarter in terms of how I put things together, I think like I would have got probably better results with like less niggles coming in, and also probably felt a bit better like on a day-to-day basis as well. So I think that is like yeah, probably my final point.
and one for the dads as well. Any advice for someone who has just become a new dad? Doesn't have to be about training, but just in life in general.
Uh, ooh, what would I advise? I think probably just like enjoy it as much as possible, and that like I fully appreciate like there are times when it is really really hard, and in those times like definitely make sure you've got people that you can kind of like lean on for support.
Mm,
But yeah, it's like it goes so fast. Like the biggest cliche that like anyone like ever say about like parenthood, but it honestly like it does absolutely fly by. So just be like being mindful of that, and just like yeah, just going with it, and not giving yourself too much of a hard time as well. Because I think it's like yeah, it can be hard enough, and probably even harder in this day and age with the amount of stuff that you see on social media of like, oh, you should be doing this or you should
yeah.
be doing that, or like, I think when like probably when we were growing up, and I was chatting to someone about this, they were like that their parents maybe went like they went to soft play maybe once a week, and the rest of the time they just played at home. Whereas now there's this pressure to do all of these like amazing things all the time. And then like it's obviously a balance. Like you want to sort of expose your children to as much as possible, but also like not feeling the pressure to like it's okay to just chill and enjoy it.
That's an interesting one. I never really thought about that. Of like probably families probably curating their family life online as well, which would actually put
Yeah.
pressure on other people to think, oh, am I doing enough with my kids?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's definitely more pressure from that perspective, like these days.
And last one, what advice would you have for people who have just retired from their chosen sport?
Um, I think probably so I was actually talking to a client about this this week, and I think it can be really hard when you get to that point because the main purpose that you've had behind your training is suddenly gone. And obviously like slightly different. to this, but like obviously you see like after the Olympics, like a lot of the athletes end up getting a bit depressed
Yeah.
because like this big thing that they've been training for has suddenly gone. So and it depends on like the kind of person they are to like to a certain extent, but I think it's really useful from a training perspective to have some short to medium term goals to make your training right now purposeful, and then also like your kind of your longer term purpose. And I think it's probably like kind of ties in probably to when more like people have families and that sort of thing. But like using training as a way to make sure you're able to like do all the stuff that you want to do for as long as possible with like with your family. Both like that, like I spoke about earlier, acutely like energy being good, mood being good, like all those like awesome acute benefits that no one really talks about from a training perspective, like making sure you're kind of training from that perspective, but also having like a long term like wanting to be able to like run around and play with your kids when they're getting a bit older and not feeling sort of like not confident in your body to be able to go and do that essentially.
Yeah, and you know what else I was just thinking there as well, and you do this really well. I know you do like these 3 month meetups with your with all your members after they've been training with you and stuff like that. And it's
Yeah.
like I think when people, and I'm just thinking about like certain friends who have like played certain sports up until like they were 30, 32, 35, and then that's gone, and then they don't really have anything to replace that, even in terms of like teammates and community and like brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever it is. I think like that's something that people don't realize is important until it's kind of taken away from them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, in terms of those training days, I would personally like to do them more often. It's just like obviously logistically and
Yeah.
also for, like for clients getting there and that sort of thing can be a little bit problematic sometimes. But I completely agree having something like that, like say that sort of that community element, is really really important. And I think just trying to make your training as social as possible is also something that's like really useful, even if it's just like but both from an accountability perspective sometimes, but like chatting to a mate who does it like who does a bit of training, just organize to go and like train with them and then maybe go some food after. That's something I try and do at least once a month now is like because life is busy, you do end up training on your own a lot. It's quite nice to like schedule something like that in that is like, yeah, you're gonna get like go and do a good session, but you're also going to get some social. You're going to go for some food after, like that sort of thing. I think is like a really good way to kind of keep it enjoyable.
Yeah, it's so important. And speaking on that, you're obviously going to be running a seminar in Dublin very, very soon. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
I am. So it's going to be at Kaizen Health and Performance. Where did you say it was?
Sandyford.
Sandyford. Okay, yeah. It's going to be on the 23rd of August, running from 12:30 till 5:30. And it's going to be on everything body weight, but more from a skills perspective than like body weight strength perspective. So we're going to be looking at breaking down handstands from the very base level, looking at mobility, building alignment, looking at kick ups, looking at actually getting to balance. Plus a few different sort of movement skills around that, which I think a lot of people do sometimes feel like very self-conscious. Like a lot of people who come to like workshops I've run before and be like, oh, I've not done a handstand since I was like 5 years old. It's like that's cool. Like everyone will be working at their level, but surpassing their expectations by the end of that. And then we're also going to look at some ring skills as well. So breaking down like again like the mobility elements of like where we need to be and progressing from there to build towards some front and back levers which are quite advanced like bodyweight skills and bridging the gap between sort of everything in between and then also some ring muscle up stuff and then part of the day because like obviously we're not going to train straight for 5 hours. There's going to be some breaks within that we're going to talk about like practical programming considerations and how to put that together, whether that's like you want to go kind of all in on it or whether you want it to just be like a bit of a bolt on that you kind of enjoy doing as part of your training but doesn't sort of isn't all encompassing and how we go about sort of putting that together. So yeah, that's gonna be on Saturday the 23rd.
Okay. Okay, so if I show up to this, I'm not going to make a fool of myself, is what you're saying.
Absolutely not, mate.
Okay, brilliant. And Tom, if people want to keep up with the work you're doing or inquire about coaching or anything like that, where can they find you?
So on Instagram, I am at Tom Project Performance, and I have very, very recently. Like I've not even announced this on social media yet, but I've just finished updating my new website, which is projectperformance.online. So yeah, that's two best places.
Love it. Amazing. Listen, thank you for today. I really appreciate it. And I will see you in Dublin very, very soon.
Wicked. Thank you very much, mate.